You did not click on this by accident. Something inside you reached a small, private breaking point. Not dramatic or headline-ready, but precise. A quiet threshold where the life you know began to feel too narrow. And another version of you, just ahead of you, began to pull. There is a version of you that already exists in the shape you are moving toward. It is not prophecy or a fixed destiny. Think of it as a living possibility that has organized itself around certain thoughts, habits, and small decisions. It's been practicing you in the background. The posture of how you laugh now, the steadier way you breathe when you speak a hard truth, the particular set of impulses that keep showing up lately. That version is radiating a subtle signal, and you are finally sensitive enough to hear it. When I say quantum, hear it as a poetic shorthand, a word we borrow to describe something small, immediate, and formative happening beneath the surface of your daily life. This is not a physics lesson. It's an invitation to notice the tiny shifts that compound into a different trajectory. Pause for a breath and name one signal you felt recently. Maybe it was a restless hour that wouldn't calm, a dream that left you oddly certain, a spontaneous refusal that felt right. Hold on to that one incident. It is the first breadcrumb of a larger pattern. If you're listening closely, you'll recognize the signs. They do not arrive as loud edicts. They come as weather inside you, subtle, repeated, and strangely clarifying. Below are the most honest indicators that your next identity is already forming. Restlessness that won't be soothed. You wake up with a low, persistent unease, and nothing you do seems to quiet it. It's not always anxiety in the clinical sense. Often, it's a vital friction between who you have been and who you are becoming. Maybe you used to savor Sunday evenings. Now they feel like a rehearsal for a life you don't want anymore. Or a job that once fit like a glove now smarts like a shoe that pinches. Restlessness shows up as a polite, insistent pressure on your attention. It redirects your curiosity. Instead of numbing the feeling, treat it like a compass needle twitching toward a new bearing. Heightened sensitivity to people and places. Suddenly, some conversations make you feel lighter, some rooms heavier. You notice how certain people leave you energized, while others drain you as if they're pulling out your battery. This sensitivity is not a flaw, it's calibration. Your emotional antenna is fine-tuning itself to frequencies that match the life you're being called into. Pay attention to whom you stay for and whom you drift from. These are not punishments, they are data. Patterns collapsing. A habit you relied on for years stops working. The routine that used to carry you now glows faint and feels brittle. You start to see how some relationships were scaffolding for a self that's dissolving, obligations that were never yours, rituals that no longer protect you. This collapse is awkward and often painful, but it's a clearing. When a pattern fails, it creates space for a new structure to form, and that emptying is the raw material for a different identity. Synchronicities and repeated nudges. 3 unrelated things point you in the same direction. A song lyric, a book opening, a chance conversation. They line up like arrows. At first, you shrug them off. Then the pattern repeats, and you begin to feel followed by meaning. These coincidences are not mystical proof, but they are invitations to pay attention. The universe, or your own inner intelligence, has a way of folding attention. When things echo, treat them as signposts rather than commands. A small, rising clarity. You find yourself able to picture decisions in sharper relief. It might be as simple as realizing that one evening of silence feels truer than 1,000 false engagements, or hearing an idea and feeling, "That's mine." This clarity isn't always accompanied by confidence. Often it's soft, a knowing that something will feel right when it happens. Trust that small certainty more than the loud, fearful narratives that used to steer you. Dreams and imaginative rehearsals. Your sleep can change. Dreams begin to feature the life you are moving toward, not in fantastical ways, but in small, ordinary scenes where you act differently. You rehearse conversation you never had, or you find yourself in a job you once admired, and the feeling is not disorienting but oddly familiar. These mental rehearsals are your mind trying on identity like clothing. They are practice. Subtle impulses that insist on expression. Maybe you start sketching again, or you find yourself saying no earlier than you once would. Perhaps you begin to ask better questions. These impulses feel like the first small movements of a muscle returning after disuse. They are not accidental. They are the language your future self uses to call you forward. If any of this resonates, notice where it shows up in your life in the last 60 days. Write down one line, the impulse, the person, the phrase stuck in your head. Keep it near you. This simple act of naming is one small aligned action, not a dramatic restructure, but a precise alignment of attention. Attention is the organ that begins to shape identity. How does the future you communicate? Think of it as resonance rather than instruction. Imagine two musical strings sitting near each other. When one string vibrates at a new pitch, the other will start to hum in sympathy. The future version of you is already vibrating at a slightly different frequency. It does not force you to change, it simply provides a harmonic you can either tune into or ignore. That harmonic arrives through feeling, not logic. It sort of arrives in 4 ways. 1. Emotional hints. You notice what lights you up and what leaves a residue of discontent. An emotional response is often the clearest indicator that something beneath the surface has shifted. Use emotion as a diagnostic tool. What emotion follows you like a weather pattern? Where does it come from, and where does it try to move your attention? 2. Recurrent thoughts. Certain ideas pop up again and again, not as grand plans, but as small, persistent templates. Maybe you keep mentally rehearsing holding a certain boundary, or fantasizing about a different rhythm of days. Recurrent thoughts are the scaffolding of a fresh self. 3. Micro behaviors. You begin to choose differently in small ways. The coffee you order, the route you take, the person you agree to meet or not meet. These small acts are not meaningless. They are experiments in identity. When you act in new ways, you create data about what those new ways feel like. 4. External patterns aligning. How other people, books, and opportunities begin to arrange themselves around you. When the internal shift is underway, a matching external pattern often follows. Not as guaranteed reward, but as a natural correspondence. Your internal tone changes, and your outer world starts to reflect that tone. None of this removes your agency. Hear that clearly. The future version of you is not an autocrat handing down orders from an ivory tower. It's an emergent possibility. It nudges, tantalizes, and clarifies, but it needs your consent to step across the threshold. Without your willingness, the pull will remain a background hum. With your willingness, small choices become leverage. You may notice a tenderness mixed with urgency in these signals. That tenderness is not flakiness. It's a form of true invitation. It asks you to bring integrity to the next phase, not to leap without looking. It asks for a step, not a leap into the dark. What about fear? Of course fear is here. It will sound like practical caution, and sometimes like a louder, older voice insisting you keep everything the same. The difference is in the origin of the voice. One is protective, reflexive, and born of habit. The other is an ancient survival program that mistakes familiarity for safety. Learn to track which voice is speaking by the quality of the invitation. Fear tightens, scolds, and shepherds you back to what is known. The future self opens with curiosity and steadier lungs. Neither is always right, but both are worth listening to. There is a common pattern I want you to recognize: the unraveling. When the next version of you begins to consolidate, old threads loosen. This happens in the practical world, often painfully. People you've known for years begin to drift, not out of malice, but because alignment changes social geography. Jobs, habits, and even daily routes can feel suddenly off. Perhaps your Friday night group no longer understands the questions you ask now. Maybe the project you once poured hours into doesn't give you the same return of meaning. This untethering is not punishment,
It is preparation. When something no longer reflects your internal frequency, it naturally uncouples. That empty space is not a void to fear, but soil to plant something that will fit better. Holding both grief and curiosity is the real skill here. Loss matters. Name it, honor it, and don't be ashamed of the stings. At the same time, allow yourself to see the clearing as room for a shape that matches your emerging tone. A word about relationships. Not every drift is a failure. Some friends will stay because the new you invites them into a deeper way of being, and others will go because their map doesn't match the new terrain. That does not make either person wrong. It merely clarifies compatibility. If a connection depletes you repeatedly, treat that as information, not as a moral failing. You are not abandoning people to chase a shiny future. You are rearranging your life so that it reflects what you are becoming. As these dissolutions happen, you may start to experience a kind of both-and state where loss and relief coexist. There will be moments of sheer loneliness. Those are real and deserve tenderness. And there will be moments when you realize the air feels a little clearer. Both are true. Accepting this paradox is part of learning how to live between timelines. Now, what helps integration begin? How do you take these small signals and intentionally weave them into your daily life so that your decisions begin to produce the person you sense in your imagination? Start with awareness. Return to that single signal you named earlier. Put it in a sentence and let that sentence be your North Star for the next 3 days. Example, I notice I feel lighter when I leave work by 5 and go for a walk. Or, I keep imagining myself speaking in a calm, direct way when facing conflict. Keep it short. Saying the observation aloud once anchors it in the body. Next, choose one aligned micro-action, not a radical overhaul, but a practical, low-resistance step that explores the truth of the signal. If the signal was restlessness at work, your micro-action could be, take 20 minutes at lunch to sketch or read something that refreshes your curiosity. If the signal was friction in a relationship, your micro-action could be, ask one honest question rather than give a rehearsed answer. These small tests give you information. They are experiments, not promises. Journal the results. You don't need to write essays. A sentence or two about how the action landed in your body will do. What shifted, what resisted, what felt like truth. The practice of noting creates a feedback loop. You try something, you observe, you adjust. Over time, these micro-experiments realign habit into identity. Create simple boundaries around attention. Guarding your attention is not dramatic asceticism. It's the way you preserve the space where the new self can form. That might mean muting a thread you don't benefit from, scheduling a morning hour where you don't check notifications, or declining one social event that repeatedly leaves you frayed. Be pragmatic. This is not about becoming isolative. It's about choosing where you invest the fragile currency of your presence. Practice the language of consent. When you feel pulled by a new direction, state it aloud to yourself in a sentence like, I am willing to explore this new rhythm. Willingness matters. The future self does not coerce, it invites. Saying yes, even quietly, is the catalytic act that transforms whisper into action. Conversely, saying no to a pattern that drains you is sometimes the same kind of consent, a choice for integrity. Remember smallness. People often imagine identity change as a dramatic pivot. Rarely is that the case. Mostly, it is a series of small, consistent choices that accumulate into new muscle memory. The most potent actions are those simple ones you can repeat without needing permission. Build on them. There is a social element to this work that is easy to underestimate. When you declare a tiny change publicly, to one friend, in a journal entry, or to a group that holds you, the decision gains edges. It's not about showmanship, it's about accountability and the energetic confirmation that your commitment matters. If there is a person who can hold you without trying to fix your process, confide in them about one micro-action you will try this week. That external witness can be a quiet booster. As you begin to act, notice how your decisions start to exert an outsized effect. This is not mystical, it's a simple lever. Identity amplifies when reinforced. A single no that respects your time can create space for multiple yeses that align with your future self. Small acts have a magnifying effect when repeated with awareness. It's also important to say what integration is not. Integration is not a tidy alignment between inner certainty and outer conditions. You will often feel some misfit between how you feel on the inside and how your life appears on the outside. That tension is not failure, it is the raw material being smoothed into shape. Integration is a process, not a polished result. Expect fits and starts. Keep the focus on alignment rather than immediate perfection. You will be tempted to wait for a perfect sign, a clear, unmistakable green light. That waiting pattern is understandable. It feels safer. But the future self rarely offers a parking lot-sized billboard that reads, "Proceed now." More often, it offers a series of small, warmer lights that add up to permission. Practicing consent to small lights trains you to accept larger ones when they come. Let me tell you about a person I'll call Maya. Not because her story is unique, but because it illustrates the delicate geometry of this shift. She was in a job that paid well and came with titles she once wanted. Over 3 months, she noticed a small, persistent boredom that made her look for meaning in the margins. A new podcast she loved, a volunteer meeting that left her enlivened, a consistent desire to write in the evenings. She didn't quit her job on a whim. Instead, she started by reclaiming 30 minutes each morning to write. She told one friend she trusted about the experiment. After several weeks, the writing felt less like occasional hobby and more like a language she had been practicing all along. The work she did in the margins began to inform the choices she made at the office. She negotiated fewer meetings and deeper focus blocks. Over time, her internal tone changed, which subtly affected how others treated her. Opportunities aligned differently, not because of magic, but because her consistent, small choices altered her trajectory. Maya's story is instructive because it shows how present choices have amplified consequences. The future self was not waiting inertly, it was being co-created every time she sat down to write one morning. That is the power of the present self acting in tiny, deliberate ways. You may hear a voice that insists on dramatic action, that the only authentic move is to abandon everything and set off on a grand restart. Resist the binary trap. Often, the courageous path is not the loudest, but the one that respects your obligations, relationships, and long-term stability while carving out an honest space for new expression. The integration you are building should not be reckless. It should be wise and curious. At the same time, there will be moments when a different kind of courage is required. A decisive act that says, in tangible terms, "I choose to align." That moment looks different for everyone. For some, it is a quiet ritual, telling a partner a truth you've skirted around. For others, it's a practical step, investing in a class, setting a boundary with a recurring obligation, or finishing a piece of work you've avoided. Whatever it is, that act is less about proving to the world you are serious, and more about proving to yourself that your inner aim has teeth. Before that decisive act, people often experience a narrowing. Ambivalence condenses into a series of clearer options. You might feel a curious pressure, like a river finding a channel. This pressure is not violent force, it is a clarifying friction. It invites you to choose. You will sense that the cost of staying the same is becoming higher than the cost of stepping into new alignment. That realization can be terrifying, and that terror is honorable. It means you are finally moving towards something of weight for you. Imagine standing at a doorway that leads into a room shaped like your emerging life. The handle is warm under your fingers. Behind you, the old room is familiar. It's lined with the objects, phrases, and roles that framed your identity. The doorway is narrow, but not punishing. Through the crack, light leaks in, and you can almost smell the texture of the air on the other side. You are aware of how many things will not fit through the door if you pass. Certain habits, old justifications, people who cling to versions of you that no longer exist. At the same time, you sense things you have longed for, steadier attention, conversations that do not exhaust you, days with a quieter internal tone. At this threshold, the work of refinement begins. What you bring across, what you let rest. The pull you feel is the future self extending a hand. You do not have to jump. But if you choose to step, the movement will not be one irreversible heroic leap. It will be incremental and self-compassionate. You might start by moving one item into the new room, a daily practice, a conversation, a boundary. The accumulation of these selections sets the architecture of the life on the other side. I want to ask you to hold the tension of two truths at once. First truth, the emerging self is real enough to change your daily choices. Second truth, you get to steward this change with patience and care. Neither truth eliminates the other. Together they form a map. Act with intention, but don't expect perfection overnight. Let's look at some practical anchors you can use this week to test the veracity of the pull you feel. These are not prescriptions for radical change. They are anchors to steady the nervous system and clarify direction. Notice and name. Each morning, for 3 mornings, spend 2 minutes naming the felt signal. A sentence. I noticed my jaw unclench when I said no yesterday. No analysis, just naming. This reduces noise and builds clarity. One small aligned action. Choose something you can do in under 20 minutes that leans into what you want to become. It can be email a mentor, sketching an idea, asking for a clearer job scope, or taking a walk to explore a neighborhood you imagine living in. Do it and note what changed afterward. A short boundary test. Pick one recurring situation that consistently drains you and set a small boundary around it for a week. That could look like attending a social event for 90 minutes instead of the whole evening, or replying to non-urgent messages only twice a day. Notice how the boundary lands. Anchor with words. Create a one-line personal statement that expresses your leaning. I am practicing a quieter way of being that honors my attention. Say it aloud once and write it where you will see it. These are experiments. They do not promise external transformation, but they create internal data that will either confirm the pull or show you blind spots to refine. As you do these practices, expect resistance. Resistance can show up as sudden busyness, a story about why you must keep everything the same, or even as a flood of doubt that your instincts are unreliable. Whenever resistance arises, meet it with curiosity. Ask, what is this fear protecting me from? What would the cost of small action be? Often, the cost is less than you imagine. One crucial distinction to keep in mind, your willingness is the decisive ingredient. Not ideas, not plans, not even perfect clarity. Willingness. Willingness is the muscle that turns a whisper into a habit. When you choose to try, you honor the future self without pretending everything is settled. Choosing is not a guarantee of immediate ease. It is the beginning of a new trajectory. There is a moral kindness in starting small. It preserves relationships, avoids drama, and inoculates you against the boom and bust cycles of reactionary change. People who leap, burn bright, and then burn out are often those who mistake intensity for sustainability. The emergent identity you seek is not built on adrenaline. It is engineered by repetition and curiosity. You may at times sense an almost magnetic quality in the world. Certain doors begin to open a little wider. Certain conversations become possible, and your calendar starts to reflect the attention you are giving. This is not mystical favoritism. It is the natural effect of consistent alignment. When your internal frequency tunes to a new pattern, you begin to notice and step into opportunities that were previously invisible. As that noticing grows, be careful not to fall into a trap of constant optimization. It's easy to turn every small win into an exhaustive audit of your life. Instead, cultivate a steady rhythm. Observe, act, note, and then rest. Rest is essential. It allows the new habits to sink into your nervous system without burning out.
One more subtle piece of guidance: be generous with the process. You will falter. You will forget your own sentence and default to old patterns. That does not erase the progress. Treat mistakes as experiments that teach you where the edges are. The emerging self is more forgiving than you are likely to be. It learns faster when you allow space for trial and error. Now imagine this pattern intensifying over weeks and months. Small actions, repeated, stacking, until the contours of your day begin to change. You will notice new alignments in how you relate to time, rest, and people. The internal tone will steady. Confidence will not necessarily roar into existence. Instead, a quieter, more reliable seed of trust will root. You will begin to orient to your days with a new gravity. What you are hearing in all of this is an invitation to be both tender and decisive. Tender toward the losses that come with rearrangement. Decisive in choosing what you will practice tomorrow. Keep one eye on your inner climate and one on small, repeatable external actions.
That is where transformation happens, at the seam between interior willingness and modest outer experiments. In the next hour or two after you listen to this, let one small, aligned act be the evidence you give yourself that you are paying attention. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be sending a short message to someone you care about that says, "I'm trying something new. Would you hold me lightly?" Or it could be setting aside 30 minutes to read a book that makes you feel seen. Keep it small. Keep it observable. You are approaching an inflection point, whether you feel it yet or not. The signals have been collecting like rain on a rooftop until the gutters strain. Soon, choices will feel more urgent because the cost of staying the same becomes louder than the cost of change. That doesn't mean everything will be easy. It means clarity will sharpen enough that indecision becomes intolerable. Picture again the doorway. Maybe you put your hand on the knob and withdraw. That is okay. Maybe you open it a hair and leave it ajar for weeks while you move a lamp through to see if the room fits. That is also a legitimate way to proceed. Or maybe you step through and start shifting items across. Each of those actions is a form of consent to the future self. On the other side of the threshold, life will not be perfect, but it will be truer. The person you become will not be devoid of struggle. Rather, their troubles will match their values more clearly. You will carry fewer internal contradictions. That alignment will feel like a small mercy each morning you wake. There is a moment coming that often arrives as an ordinary morning, infused with a sudden quiet certainty. You will be doing something mundane, making coffee, folding laundry, pausing at the window, and a voice inside will say simply, yes. It will not be triumphant. It will feel like the settling of a bone after a long misalignment. When that yes comes, note how you breathe. Note what the body knows before the mind agrees. That yes is not a singular, irrevocable decree. It is the beginning of a string of commitments that will either reinforce one another or pull you back. Your work after that yes is to translate feeling into small, steady acts that match it. Practice becomes the bridge from sensation to structure. If you want to deepen this, consider a short, private ritual that translates your willingness into a visible act. Write a sentence that captures the meaning of the yes, fold it into your daily planner, or set a daily alarm labeled with that sentence. Do not turn it into performance. Keep it private or share it with one trusted witness. This visibility creates gentle accountability. As you prepare to act, remember that the future self is not a fixed statue waiting to be revealed. It is a pattern you grow into by accumulating choices, experiments, courage, and compassion. The pattern will correct itself as often as you need it to.
Your role is not to bulldoze your way into an imagined future, but to steward the formation of a self that is responsive, honest, and alive. Sooner than you expect, the gravity of your choices will make themselves known. You may receive an opportunity you once would have dismissed. You may find conversations now possible that were previously impossible. You may begin to attract people who reflect the tone you are practicing. Notice these correspondences without making them the sole measure of progress. External shifts are not guaranteed, nor are they the point. Internal alignment is the practice. Right now, at this precise place in your life, the most useful question is not, will I change everything? The most useful question is, what is the smallest thing I can do today that honors the person I sense is already trying to form? Answer that with tenderness and resolve. Then do it. You are on a path between two timelines. One is well-worn and recognizable, the other is still being knit. The signs you are seeing are the beginning of that knitting process. Give them attention. Give yourself permission to be curious rather than pressured. Give yourself the gift of willingness. Hold one more image for a moment. A crack in an old wall that allows a sliver of light to pass. At first, the light is a sliver, and the crack seems small. Over time, as you tend it, that crack widens into a doorway. Your future self is the light. Your present self is the hand that decides how wide the crack becomes. Decide to keep the hand steady. Tonight, before you sleep, bring to mind the single signal you named earlier. Keep it brief. One sentence, no drama. Place it beside your bed and let it be the last thing you hold in your mind. Let it sit there like a seed you've planted. Tomorrow morning, do one small thing to water it. In the next part of this exploration, we will move toward the moment when those small acts gather into a clear choice, when the tug becomes a willingness that looks like action. We will speak about what to do when the outer world resists the inner shape, how to hold both practical prudence and bold attention, and the particular practices that accelerate integration without burning you out. For now, stay with your signal. Keep the sentence. Try the small experiment. Notice what the world begins to mirror back. Now notice how those small acts begin to cluster into a pattern. They do not become a headline overnight. They accrete like pebbles into a cairn you can follow on foggy ground. That cairn is your proof, a string of tiny, repeatable choices that together point toward a different version of you. The moment those choices feel like a single direction is the moment you arrive at a real decision. Less dramatic than a cinematic leap, more like a steadying of the spine. When the outer world resists the inner shape. Resistance from the outside will come. This is normal and useful information, not an indictment of your desire.
The world will test the new contours you're carving. A manager may object to a reduced workload. A close friend may misunderstand the boundaries you set. A recurring bill will remind you that change needs a runway. Expect friction, plan for it. Here are ways to respond that keep you steady without courting harm. 1. Treat resistance as data, not doom. When someone pushes back, ask a curious question before escalating. What exactly is being asked of me? What is the real cost they're afraid of? Sometimes friction is a negotiation problem disguised as personal rejection. By turning toward clarity, asking for specifics, timelines, or trial periods, you convert threat into information. 2. Build a practical runway. If you're experimenting with a new career interest, create a financial buffer before making structural shifts. That might mean saving 3 months of expenses or trimming luxuries temporarily while you test options. A runway reduces panic and keeps courage sustainable. It also allows your choices to be made from curiosity and creativity instead of desperation. 3. Use temporary experiments as proof of concept. Rather than declaring a permanent change, frame early moves as time-limited tests. Tell your manager you want to try a concentrated focus block for a month and report back. Tell a friend you're trying a new weekly ritual and invite feedback. Temporary language reduces defensiveness in others and gives you the freedom to iterate. 4. Communicate with integrity. If a relationship shifts, avoid dramatic ultimatums. Use I statements. I've been noticing that I have less bandwidth for late-night calls, and I want to try a new routine for a few weeks to see how I land. Inviting people into the experiment invites empathy. It also honors both your own needs and their dignity. 5. Keep your commitments where they matter. Do not abandon obligations without care. If you have dependents, financial responsibilities, or legal ties, integrate the change patiently. Small shifts, reducing hours gradually, delegating, or renegotiating roles are often more loving and effective than sudden severances. Courage that ignores duty is brittle. Courage that adapts to context is durable. Practices that accelerate integration without burning you out. Integration is not speed, it is steadiness. The practices that help you accelerate are the ones that preserve your nervous system while increasing precision. Here are concrete habits to try, designed to be small, repeatable, and humane. 1. The 3-sentence morning anchor. Each morning for a week, state 3 short sentences. 1 observation, 1 intention, 1 small action. Example: I noticed I feel tighter after long meetings. Today I will stand up and stretch at the top of every hour. I will send 1 short email that sets a boundary. Keep them visible, sticky note, phone lock screen, or a line in your planner. 2. The 2-minute rescue for fears.
When fear spikes, use a quick protocol. Label the fear aloud. This is fear about change. Breathe 4 counts in, 6 counts out, and ask, what is one tiny thing I can do in 5 minutes that honors what I want? Then do that one tiny thing. This interrupts panic loops and routes you back to practical agency. 3. The public-private calibration. Choose one person you trust as a witness for your experiments. Tell them your 1-week test and ask for one small way they can support you. No advice, just witness. The right witness creates a soft accountability that reinforces new behavior without turning it into performance. 4. Embodiment checks. Identity is stored in the body as much as in language. Add short physical practices, 2-minute stretches, 3 breaths before a conversation, 5 minutes of walking with attention to posture, that train the body to hold the new tone you're cultivating. When thought and posture align, decisions feel less scary. 5. The ritual of microclosure. When an old pattern collapses, an ended project, a drifting friendship, a job role that no longer fits, create a small private closure ritual. Write a sentence thanking it for what it taught you, then fold it and put it somewhere symbolic, or read it aloud once. Grief is real. Ritual honors it and prevents reactive rebounds. 6. Scheduling the inner life. Block time for non-urgent inner work the way you block work meetings. An hour of reading, 30 minutes of journaling, a weekly creative slot. The consistency signals to your nervous system that this is not a hobby, but a structural commitment. Over months, those hours are where the future self sharpens. 6. The no practice that preserves relationship. Practice saying no with an add-on. I can't do this, but I can do this. It keeps boundaries clear without cutting the relational bridge. You learn you can protect your attention and still show up in meaningful ways. How to speak when your inner aim collides with other people. There is a special choreography to these conversations. People rarely object to the fact of change. They object to loss, unpredictability, or feeling excluded. You can respect both needs. Start with curiosity. Ask what the change looks like from their side. How would this shift affect you? Offer experiments, not ultimatums. Can we try this boundary for 3 weeks and then check in? Name your values, not your judgments. I am doing this because I need to protect my attention. I am not judging you for your choices. Invite participation when appropriate. If you want to help me practice, would you be willing to remind me gently? Or, I'd love to hear what you need while I try this. Hold your ground kindly. Boundaries can be repeated without rancor. Grounding in your willingness makes your words believable. Handling grief, second-guessing, and sabotage. You will have days that feel like setbacks. 2 things help: naming and framing.
Give it a label. Today I felt grief, or I'm experiencing the tug back. Naming reduces the anonymous power of the feeling and allows you to treat it like weather. Frame setbacks as experiments. When you revert to an old habit, describe it as data. This shows me where my triggers are. Ask, what was the antecedent? What felt irresistible? How could I design a different response next time? Create a small repair protocol. If you break a promise to yourself, do one of 3 things within 24 hours. Acknowledge, adjust, recommit. Write 1 sentence about why it happened and what you will do differently. Then do 1 small aligned thing to prove the recommitment, not to punish yourself, but to rebuild trust. Practice the art of tender curiosity. When sabotaging inner voices rise, you're not serious, you'll fail. Respond with gentle questions. Who taught me this story? What would happen if I tested it for 1 week? Curiosity weakens absolutist narratives and opens space for experiment. Routines and rituals that support momentum. Routines are scaffolding. Rituals are meaning-making. Both matter. Weekly review ritual. Once a week, spend 10 to 15 minutes answering 3 questions. What worked? What resisted? What 1 action will I try next week? This keeps momentum without frantic optimization. Small public commitments. Post 1 small update to a trusted group or tell 1 friend what you tried. Not everything needs to be public, but occasional visibility produces accountability and reduces the tendency to self-sabotage in secret. Threshold rituals. Before an important conversation, take 3 breaths, say your 1-sentence anchor, and then speak. After, note 1 small observation about how it landed. Rest rituals. Schedule real downtime. No productivity guilt. The new identity requires replenished energy. Rest is not indulgence, it's infrastructure. When the outer world offers an opportunity that doesn't fit, opportunities will arrive framed as compliments, a promotion, a new relationship, an invitation that looks shiny. Learn to test opportunities against your interior compass. Ask, does this opportunity align with my emergent tone? If it does, can I accept it in a way that preserves my new boundaries? If it doesn't, is there a way to shape it so it does? Negotiation often beats refusal. Small language to use. Thank you. This is interesting. I'm experimenting with a different rhythm right now. Could we explore an arrangement that looks like X? You might be surprised how willing others are to co-create around a person who knows what they want. The crucial leadership move, trade intensity for consistency. Many people mistake intensity for progress. They launch grand initiatives, burn bright, then default back to old habits. The better path is consistent, gentle repeatability. Think of your work as designing a habit architecture, not staging a revolution. Choose actions you can repeat when tired. Design for maintenance, not for maximum impact. Celebrate the cumulative effect. 10 minutes a day for 6 months is a far more reliable builder than a week-long sprint. A story to hold. Jonah's slow pivot. Jonah was restless in his role as a product manager. He loved solving problems, but felt dull in the repetitive reporting cadence. Instead of dramatic exits, he began a small practice. 1 hour a week of exploratory reading and 2 short interviews a month with people in adjacent fields. He told his manager he wanted to experiment with a focused project block for 8 weeks. His manager agreed to a trial, partly because Jonah presented a data-based plan, and partly because Jonah had been consistently delivering on small responsibilities. Over a year, Jonah's exploratory hour turned into a consulting side project that informed changes at his company. He didn't quit and flame out. He slowly reshaped his work into something truer. The key was patience and incremental shifts that respected his obligations and his curiosity. Choice as a series of micro yeses. Think of choice not as a single binary event, but as a string of micro yeses. Each small affirmative act, saying no to one draining meeting, taking 30 minutes for a creative practice, telling one person about your experiment, adds up to a decisive vector. When you look back months from now, the vector will appear as a choice that once felt impossible. The moment of clearer willingness. There will be a day when the cumulative weight of micro yeses tips into a clearer willingness. It will likely arrive on an ordinary morning, as you're making coffee or walking down the street. The sensation is less theatrical than relief, a soft alignment in the chest, a lowering of internal friction. The body says yes before the mind files paperwork. In that moment, do one small thing that makes the yes material. Tell someone briefly. Make a tiny scheduling change, or write the word yes on a piece of paper and slide it into your planner. These micro-acts anchor the subjective certainty into observable life. Handling the aftermath of that yes. After a yes, expect a mixture of steadiness and new perturbations. You may face testing circumstances designed by reality to confirm your direction. Keep the practices above handy: runway planning, experiments, accountability, and rest. Over time, the yes becomes habitual and less dramatic. You will laugh at how often you previously believed transformation required spectacle. A micro-ritual to solidify your alignment. If you want a simple ritual that converts inward commitment into outward momentum, try this tonight. Write one short sentence that captures the heart of your emerging life. No adjectives, no justifications. Example: I practice a quieter attention. Fold it and place it somewhere you will see tomorrow morning. In the morning, read the sentence aloud and do one small aligned action within the first hour of your day. These micro-acts anchor the subjective certainty into observable life. Handling the aftermath of that yes. After a yes, expect a mixture of steadiness and new perturbations. You may face testing circumstances designed by reality to confirm your direction. Keep the practices above handy: runway planning, experiments, accountability, and rest. Over time, the yes becomes habitual and less dramatic. You will laugh at how often you previously believed transformation required spectacle. A micro-ritual to solidify your alignment. If you want a simple ritual that converts inward commitment into outward momentum, try this tonight. Write one short sentence that captures the heart of your emerging life. No adjectives, no justifications. Example: I practice a quieter attention. Fold it and place it somewhere you will see tomorrow morning. In the morning, read the sentence aloud and do one small aligned action within the first hour of your day. These micro-acts anchor the subjective certainty into observable life.
That one act is the bridge between inner intent and outer pattern. What not to do. Do not wait for perfection. There will never be an entirely clean moment to begin. Do not measure progress only by external validation. Internal alignment is the truer metric. Do not treat every setback as disproof. Data, not drama, is the teacher here. Do not lean on intensity as your primary strategy. It is unsustainable. A small map for complicated changes. If your life involves significant interdependencies, family, shared finances, partnerships, use a phased map. Phase 1. Inward calibration, 1 to 6 weeks. Notice signals, pick one micro-action, start a weekly review, and secure a small runway. Phase 2. Experimental shaping, 6 to 20 weeks. Run several short trials, communicate with key people, and test boundaries. Keep obligations intact while prototyping new patterns. Phase 3. Consolidation and scaling, 6 to 12 months. Use evidence from experiments to request structural changes or to shift responsibilities. By now, your nervous system and network have begun to mirror the emerging tone. Phase 4. Stewardship, ongoing. Maintain rituals, refresh your runway, and continue to practice tenderness toward both loss and growth. Remember, the future self is not a destination, it's a feedback loop. Your future self is not a statue on a pedestal. It is an emergent pattern you co-create through attention, small choices, and steady experiments. The pattern will evolve. You will too. That is part of the joy. You are not aiming for perfection, but for coherence, the alignment where inner tone and outer practice speak the same language. Anxiety about time and missed windows. A common fear is that time will run out, or that opportunities will vanish if you do not act now. Time is not a finite enemy in every case. Sometimes it is a collaborator. Patience is not passive waiting, but steady tending.
That said, there are moments when the cost of waiting becomes higher than the cost of an aligned step. Use friction as your guide. When the cost of staying the same outweighs the risk of trying, that is a legitimate moment to escalate your experiment. How to know when to accelerate? You might speed up if your micro-actions are producing consistent internal confirmation. Your external experiments are yielding manageable consequences. You have a practical runway and supportive witnesses. You are not relying on adrenaline to sustain the effort. If those conditions are absent, slow down, refine, and deepen your basics. The ethical framework of transformation. Change is not only personal, it is social. How you move. Strive for a transformation that honors others, keeps promises where possible, and is transparent when it affects other people's lives. Radical honesty wrapped in compassion is better than covert shifts that leave others bewildered.
A final practical scaffold to use this week. Tonight, reread your one-sentence seed and place it where you will see it in the morning. Tomorrow, perform one small aligned action within the first hour. This week, pick one draining recurring obligation and run a 7-day boundary experiment. End of week, spend 10 minutes reviewing what shifted, what resisted, and one tweak for next week. The decision moment. Invitation, not coercion. As you move through these steps, the decisive moment will feel lighter than you expect. It will be less about proving something to the world and more about giving yourself permission. The future self never coerces, it invites. Your consent, spoken or enacted, is the catalytic element. When you say yes clearly and do one visible thing that matches it, you create a new datum in your life. The world adjusts around that datum. If this resonates and you are ready to give yourself a small public accountability, here is a simple, powerful step. Type in the comments below this video, "I am aligning with the future that is calling me." Use those words exactly if they ring true. It is a small collective ritual. Your declaration becomes a witness and a bridge. If you prefer privacy, write the sentence in your journal and tell one trusted person instead. Either way, making a short, outward statement transforms private longing into an observable commitment. Walk with this. The person on the other side of the doorway is not an unattainable ideal, but a series of moments that have learned to answer again and again with a quieter, truer voice. You are not required to sprint. You are required to tend the small edges with honesty and curiosity. Keep your hands steady on the handle. Keep returning to the simple experiments. Keep the language of willingness close. You did not arrive here by accident. Something inside has been asking for a different rhythm. Give it the attention it deserves. Gentle, persistent, practical. Take one small step tonight or tomorrow. If you choose to make that step public, put the words in the comments now. I am aligning with the future that is calling me. Walk forward with tenderness and resolve. Your future self is already practicing you. Answer the call.